And those are some of the things we need to think about how to move money and move it effectively. I wish I had the right answer for you. I'm working on it. Maybe next session I'll be able to do it. But these are really fundamental questions that we should all be talking about. I really, and I appreciate the question. Rodney?
I have just a couple of points to add. One, I think the focus on what others are doing is a reaction to a sense of stovepiping within the U.S. government, that there's kind of, what is it when you talk about a particular country, what are other donors doing? And sometimes in Washington there's a blank look. I will honestly say, in my experience, whenever I went to a country and you're out in the field, in fact, the donors were really well organized. Everybody knew everybody else. They all talked about what the programs were. There was clearly a lot of sharing. But that information doesn't come back to Washington in a very organized way. And importantly, for planning purposes, for looking forward, whether you're at OMB or the House, what you want to know is not what DFID or AFD or the IDB is doing in a country today. You want to know, well, where are they likely to be 3 years from now or 2 years from now? So I think that's a broken feedback loop that does need to be fixed. I will also say, based on my experience, the World Bank and some of these other trust funds are not one whit cheaper than what the U.S. does. In fact, there's a lot of inefficiency built into I shouldn't use those words in public. There are a lot of extra costs that seem to be buried into those numbers. And I think when people scrutinize that, although there's a lot to be learned, and I'm a huge believer in frankly, using other donors, other private institutions, I don't think we do it nearly enough, and I think that's what the administration is groping for. I don't think it's any one instrument, whether multilateral or not.
Regarding the alliances, I mean, I agree, with Rodney saying, first of all, the way aid does things is very expensive. They put people on ground, they put families on ground, and that is a very expensive thing to do. However, with that is that they get a huge presence. I don't think any other foreign government does that. They usually just, they'll have projects, they just send people in, the flyovers. They send them in for, every couple of months to see how it's going on, and then they go out. You're looking at the costs, I really would have to analyze the cost to see if there's any real cost savings there. But what the U.S. government would lose if they basically just did these alliances, i.e. turn the money over to the World Bank, turn it over to the UN, they lose an incredible amount of authority. So I think that's an approach that has to be, funneled back and saying, yeah, you can look at the cost here, let's take a look at the cost there, and with that goes all of your authority.
The money that's being thrown at Afghanistan is having a negative impact rather than helping. And I wonder if you all might comment on that.
Mr. Afghanistan?
Anytime you throw huge sums of money, and I'm not just talking about the U.S. government and the Congress, but if you're in Afghanistan, there's funding coming in from a large number of people. A year ago, we were renting housing for our people and trying to keep them safe and secure, and one of the houses was running about $16,000 a month, which is a lot of money in Afghanistan. We went to renew our lease, and we were told that they were not going to renew our lease because somebody had come in and offered $32,000 a month for that particular house. And I was outbid by a U.S. government agency that wanted it over a contractor. So there is a natural tendency for corruption to raise its head when there's that kind of money, depending on who's owning the house, who's renting the house. Certainly, my fear is that the Afghans themselves, if the people that have the money are the ones that own those houses, they are not necessarily motivated for us to be successful and get out of Afghanistan. I heard this morning Karzai say, well, I'm glad that you guys are coming in, but we may need you 10 to 15 more years in this country before we're ready. And I'm concerned when I hear statements like that, and I'm concerned about how everything goes. So yeah, I do think that large sums of money can, by their very nature, lead to problems that you're referring to, and I think certainly that's happening in Afghanistan.
Should we change the order, Diana?
Not really a lot to add. I think there's always the Willie Sutton rule of corruption follows the money. I think the challenge, frankly, in Afghanistan is twofold. One is sort of the direct assistance part of it, and that's clearly there. You see it in Iraq, see it in Vietnam 30 years ago. But really the more fundamental question is, how do you help the Afghanistan government build its capacity, build the systems, train the people? I don't frankly think it's a question of ethics. I think it's much more complex than that. It's cultural, it's a whole range of things. In that sense, I think Karzai is right. You know, it will be 10 or 15 years, maybe 20, maybe 30, maybe 40. But what I think you can change are the expectations of Afghani citizens for their government or not. And I think, frankly, going in and assuming that you can create a Western-style government with social delivery systems that are going to be as good as they are in Switzerland or Finland is delusional. I think what you can say is, okay, well, what are the cultural norms? What can we do? Where do we want to start? How can you make systems more transparent? You know, civil service rules, civil service payment, civil service reform, the holy grail of anti-corruption efforts. I think there's a lot that could be done there.
I want to ask on the resourcing side, not so much on the instrument side, with specific regard to the idea of doing a foundation for USAID. Danny's done such nice benchmarking of other agencies in terms of what they've done, and there are some precedents for this. I know I looked at it years ago when we were putting together the Global Development Alliance, and we decided that wasn't the right solution at the time. But I wondered if either in terms of other agencies' experience and or the palatability from the health perspective or thoughts that you might have, Tim, if you could comment on would setting up a foundation, a USAID foundation, provide some agility and surge potential that or lasting opportunities that we don't currently have?
I mean, endowments have been set up, and I think that they work best when they're low profile and small and discreet. The Congress and the presidency like to take an annual view of how resources are spent, and so that mitigates against it. I think it would be unlikely for any large scale, the Jesse Helms idea of 15 years ago or 20 years, whatever it was. I wanted to see Jesse get up and say, yes, I favor giving $1 billion to a group of people that I won't control anymore. I think it goes back and forth. I think the arguments for an endowment are plausible if you accept that purpose doesn't need to be reviewed and you want to provide operating freedoms and flexibility. It doesn't really work if you want to have tight control, and frankly what I've seen is increasingly a desire for control.
Holly, we did an endowment down in Honduras, which we worked on. The one thing that struck me, I thought it was a great idea. It was going to generate money. It was going to leave a legacy for a period of time. The amount of work and labor